The German composer Johannes Brahms was born in 1833 in Hamburg. He was a true son of German Romanticism, the dominant philosophical and cultural movement of his time. Brahms was not only interested in music. Already as a boy, he was also a passionate reader, whose favourite authors were German Romanticists like E.T.A. Hoffmann, Jean Paul, Joseph von Eichendorff, and Achim von Arnim. Brahms became one of the most masterful and diligent composers of all time. He set to music almost exclusively romantic poetry, and thus became one of the most important interpreters of the romantic ideals. His songs are full of true romantic spirit. They depict unhappy love, madness, the power of nature, the Middle Ages, knights, nuns, fairy tale characters, and the darkness of the night.
I wrote my doctoral thesis about a personal poetry collection, which was selected and handwritten by the German composer Johannes Brahms. It's now housed in the library at the Town Hall of Vienna. There I worked on deciphering the tiny and sometimes smudged handwriting. This small, worn-out notebook with brownish paper and some missing pages probably aided Brahms' work as a song composer. What attracted my attention almost immediately was the number of poems with a cloister theme. Brahms had chosen unusually many poems describing unhappy nuns. Upon further research, I realized that he had also composed several cloister songs. I found this interesting because Brahms was a confident Protestant from Hamburg. He probably had had only little contact, if any, with the Catholic Church or the abbeys in his youth. In many of these Brahms songs, the convent is, in fact, described as a lonely and dismal place. The nuns in Brahms' compositions are invariably sad and often even unhappily in love.
For the Romanticists, very interested in the Middle Ages and also in the Roman Catholic Church, cloisters were an especially popular setting for their tales. Catholicism fascinated them with its dark history and mystic experiences, its miracles and saints. Many true Romanticists converted from Protestantism to Catholicism. The adoration of the Virgin Mary was important for them. Mary, the blessed God-bearing maid, was seen as a symbol of fruitful nature. Even Brahms, who was actually a Protestant, wrote many songs about the Virgin Mary. Wilhelm Heinrich Wackenroder wrote a best-selling romantic novel about a monk who admired the visual arts. It was one of the first novels with a cloister theme. The art-loving friar of the book describes the two languages through which God manifests himself: art and nature. The book was soon followed by other cloister novels by important romantic authors such as Achim von Arnim, Ludwig Tieck, and E.T.A. Hoffmann. The Romanticists often imagined abbeys as dark and lonely buildings in the Middle Ages. They favoured such gloomy places: castles, caves, prisons, ruins, and convents. The darkness was also linked with horror romanticism. In Gothic fiction, the romantic love theme was combined with dreadful crimes. An obscure cloister cell could also be a symbol of chained passions.
When Brahms wrote songs about unhappy nuns who had a bitter destiny, he simply chose a very popular theme of his time. He was well informed by the trends of the Romantic poetry. There was nothing more fashionable than the tale of a nun who was practically buried alive in a convent because of some inappropriate entanglement.
We now hear a duet set to the poetry of Justinus Kerner. It is called Klosterfräulein, Young Nun. One can imagine two nuns, each singing alone in their sombre cells behind bars, as described in the poem. The nuns blame their mothers for sending them to the convent. The cloister is situated on a mountain, and through the windows the nuns can see lambs and doves, always in pairs, which remind them of their own solitude. It is also significant that they mention the spring which has passed by. In Romantic poetry, the spring is typically a metaphor of love. The next melody is not originally by Brahms. It is a folk ballad which he transcribed wonderfully for a solo singer and piano. It tells the story of Gunhilde, a pious nun who is seduced by a priest. They elope to a foreign land and there lead an uncertain life full of sin and crime. Gunhilde's lover, the former priest who has become a robber, is caught and hanged. Gunhilde must then beg her way back to her cloister. Upon returning, she asks for permission to do penance. However, nobody seems to have noticed that Gunhilde has been away. When she returns to her cloister cell, she finds an angel who looks like her and has been her substitute while she has been away. The angel promptly disappears in front of her eyes. There can hardly be a more romantic poem than this folk ballad. The cloister is seen here as a faraway home which the fallen nun, Gunhilde, misses while in exile. Longing for home was one of the Romanticists' favourite themes. They often felt they were strangers in the greyness of everyday life, visitors from a better, ideal romantic world, their real home.
In the end, we experience a mysterious miracle. An angel, looking exactly like Gunhilde, had taken Gunhilde's place in the cloister while she had been away. The other nuns hadn't noticed her absence and knew not of all the sins she had committed. For me, this is a very touching moment in the story. It reminds me of the parable of the prodigal son in the Bible, who sins, repents, and returns home, and is forgiven. But it also brings to my mind another important theme of Romanticism, the Doppelganger. The Romantic literature is full of these doubles of living persons. Sometimes they are good-natured, sometimes evil, or even an omen of death. In this poem, the Doppelganger, the angel that looks exactly like Gunhilde, is a messenger of forgiveness. The Doppelganger theme is linked with the romantic idea that a human being has two levels, unconscious and conscious. In this case, it probably describes the two sides of Gunhilde, the sinful one and the pious one.
Brahms' duet, Die Nonne und der Ritter, The Nun and the Knight, is based upon an impressive poem by Joseph von Eichendorff, one of the most famous Romanticists. In this composition, we meet a nun who is alone in a cloister at night. She listens to the murmur of the sea in the distance. Suddenly, she hears the voice of her beloved knight, which floats through the mild air. The voice of the knight evokes her memories. He tells her about her castle, which is now in ruins, and about the crusade in which he has taken part. Melancholy falls on the nun as she listens to the voice. Many romantic themes intertwine in this ballade. The night, madness, the Middle Ages, a dark cloister, and the unhappy love of the separated pair. The Romanticists thought that various unusual states of mind, such as raving madness or being in love, were caused by a breakthrough of huge vital forces. In the darkness of the night, the nun must meet her unconscious mind, her truly romantic soul.
In the beginning, one can almost assume that the nun really hears the voice of the knight over the cloister wall. Towards the end, the listener realizes that the knight hasn't really returned from the Holy Land, where the troops are fighting over the grave of Christ. His voice is only a symbol of longing, a sign of the nightly madness which tortures the nun. In this ballad, I imagine that the nun is already an elderly sister in the convent. She was in love with the knight a long time ago, before he became a crusader. Many things remain unsure. Why is her castle now in ruins? What has separated these two lovers? Why is she in the cloister now? And finally, is the knight actually still alive? The nun can suddenly hear his voice inside the cloister walls. It suggests that he might have been killed in action in the Holy Land. He's only a memory, a sign of madness, an angel, or a ghost.
Drüben liegt dein Schlaf.